the professor from VU who has studied a lot of the American Indian stuff. He's up on the treaties and who we screwed when we screwed them. So, that'll all be...
It's a lot of screwing.
It is a lot of screwing, absolutely. So, good background information for the Standing Rock. And also you're going to talk about some of the other Indians as well, right? Great.
Yes.
Okay, Professor, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Kirk and I were talking on the way over a little bit about the subject I last talked about here, which was exit polling and the deviation of the Democratic primaries and the stealing of the primaries from Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
And amusingly, the Democrats are raising a huge fuss over Russia, along with the CIA. And all of this has to do with making war in Syria and engaging Russia further in war, and very little with evidence, so that actually it's very hard to make Trump rational on any issue, if I may say. And he's about to attack, he's thundering about Iran, so you can't say that he's very much better. But I'm afraid that on this issue, he has almost a complete monopoly of good sense. And the idea that you have to rely on America's secret police forces, either led by Mr. Comey in the election or the CIA, and that this is really a good thing to do, is something that ought to be thought about. But the deeper point is just this. I published an article in the Daily Beast. It is the lone article in the corporate press on the fact that the exit polls in the election showed that in 4 swing states Hillary won, and that in Ohio Trump was reported as leading by a tenth of a point, which could have been reversed in the actual counting of the vote because the margin of error is 2.5 points on either side. But he's shown as winning in Ohio by 8 points. So that isn't conceivable. And the 5 results together are even less conceivable. And the State Department would challenge this anywhere else in the world. And the commercial media has buried it, except CNN, which actually printed the exit polls, which is why I have them, among their 50 characteristics. So if anybody would like to ask me about this later on, I think it is highly relevant to what we discussed before, and since we all have to deal with Trumpiola and his monstrousness internally, and probably worth discussing something. It is a week of demonstrations, I understand. Anyway, I have an article forthcoming in the Daily Beast, because I'm now sort of a regular correspondent, it seems, on Standing Rock and the Tibetan border protectors. And I want to talk a little bit about Standing Rock and then a lot about the Tibetan border protectors. And I think the most obvious issue, NPR did a story on January 4th about the flooding of the Louisiana coast and the destruction of indigenous artifacts, and how there were really great things there that were about to be lost. In addition to the place being washed out. And of course the so-called, the elite, the rich people in Louisiana can't be bothered much. They are the most retrograde, or among the most retrograde. It's not clear who they are. I mean, California is not the most retrograde. They're good at stealing elections, as in the Democratic primary, but they're not the most retrograde. But it's really a major thing. You don't have to be too aware to realize that we don't have that much time. Right? The earth is changing. And the earth is changing in a way that will make human life impossible pretty soon. And make human life what, for most of the century, a subject of water wars. Like, the central issue in Asia is Tibet is the roof of the world, or the third pole. And 11 great rivers come down from the Yarlung Tsangpo, which is the great river in Tibet. This river runs with more depth and force than all the rivers of Europe combined. The only two rivers in the world that compare with it are the Amazon and the Congo. China is busy damming in Tibet and all over China. They have 26,000 dams now. By the way, more than all the rest of the world combined. They've learned from Russia and the US, damming. All the fish are dying. Water is being diverted. All these folks in Asia depend on this water. I went to Dharamsala for a month with students in India. It's in the Indian Himalayas. It is where the Tibetan Buddhists are in exile. You know, a couple 100,000. There are roughly 6 million in Tibet. It may be somewhat more because that estimate may be low. The Chinese government probably killed about 1 million, so it's unclear what the numbers are at this point. But you fly into New Delhi. I don't know if anybody read about it, but the New York Times had a story that the biggest smog since the London smog of 1952 that killed a couple hundred people and had the first environmental measures taken in London. This was the biggest, the worst smog since then. New York Times ran a story, I read it before I went. One woman said, I was in my house with my kids, my apartment, and it was like a gas chamber. They don't have the biggest experience with gas chambers in China.
When was this? When was this?
The end of November in Delhi. And
The
I was
London.
flying into Delhi with students, and so I arranged that we not rely on effective gas masks, but we not go through Delhi, and we go directly to Dharamsala, which is about 15 hours by bus from Delhi, so we flew in for 15 hours and then got to ride there. And they're pretty resilient, and I'm managed. I'm not quite sure how. But then it turned out that the Prime Minister, Modi, has also decided to get rid of corruption by outlawing the main forms of currency. He outlawed the $8 and $15 bills because people hoard them up to pay for dowries and corrupt people keep them. So he got a lot of money put into banks because of it. But it turned out we got to Delhi, we could only exchange $80 waiting in line at the airport. And I couldn't exchange money in Delhi or in India. And so we had long lines. So this is big. It was really crazy. And so in addition to everything else, we had a bus set up to go to Dharamsala, but we had to go through the currency line for a couple hours to get a little bit of currency before shooting on it. We went back to Delhi. I will just say I had a slight cold when I got there, and I was coughing the whole time with a gas mask, and it was brutal. It was only by the time I got on the plane, flew for a while, that I managed to get in better shape.
Wow.
You drive by bus from Delhi, it was about 4 or 5 hours out there before you can see. My research assistant, who's been involved with me for 4 years, my co-coordinator, she came with a student who had missed the flight from London because they had too rapid a turnover time. And so she waited and came with the student, and she went to the place where, you know, it's a colonized country. And the thing about colonies, just like all pretty genocidal arrangements, which colonies are, and some are more extreme than others, but we're discussing settler colonialism and indigenous people. Anyway, they still have the British Parliament. That's where the Indians go when they make their decisions. And they have a big round circle that they had Lord Mountbatten in. And they took down the portrait of Lord Mountbatten. Thank God. And they were going to put up a portrait of, they were going to put up Gandhi in it. And the British said, oh no, oh no. And Nehru, who was a punk, said, he always great. Anyway, he said, okay, so they don't have anything in the circle till now. And I discussed it with one of the silly Hindu nationalists. They're a very ugly party. They're the party that murdered Gandhi and blew off a nuclear weapon on Buddha's birthday. So, friends of the United States and Israel, I am sure that everybody should be very happy with Mr. Modi. Anyway, the tour guide, I was discussing it with him, he was a Sikh. They were military people, all his family was. I said, oh, Modi will take care of it. And he said, Gandhi was a consumptive weakling for being for nonviolence. But Modi didn't take care of it. So my assistant, Jordan, was driving through there in a car. They hired a private car to get her and the other student, Anna, come to Dharamsala. And she could see the empty shell, circular shell of the statue. And the parliament is right behind it. She couldn't see the parliament. She could not see the parliament. It was all white smog. Now, perhaps I needn't tell you that in Beijing, before the 2008 Olympics, they stopped the traffic for 6 months so that you could actually briefly see the sun. And athletes wore masks to be in the Olympics, you may remember. It was a great celebration, ultimate celebration by the now capitalist Chinese elite, authoritarian Chinese elite, right? But it is.
What is the source of the pollution in India?
The source of the pollution in both places is coal burning. It's burning of all sorts of stuff.
They don't have as many cars as many places.
They have many, many cars, and they are doing a lot of coal production, and they have a pollution which is less checked in certain ways. In India, less checked entirely. Modi is a Trump.
Industrial.
Yeah, little industrial stuff.
I'll just remind everybody of our VFP policy where we hold questions until the end so our speaker can get through his presentation. We'll do questions at the end. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, okay, but these are good questions because I would like to make the point that you cannot be in Asia. These are the two biggest countries in Asia. They are leading powers. You know, you want to talk about where the computer jobs from Boulder are gone. They've been shipped out to India. There's a little bit of a middle class, while a vast number of people live on under $1 a day. They have a poverty in India. There's a beauty in India and a poverty in India which is excruciating. China has 10 green cities. That's not because they're so wonderful. They're also trying to conquer the world for green energy. You want solar panels? I took a fast train from Liaoning, where I taught a few years ago near North Korea, to Beijing. And you can see solar panels on farmers' houses, right? All the stuff about Chinese militarism, I'm sorry, you know, China ain't waging war in Mexico and Canada, i.e. Vietnam and Korea, for some of you who've had the glorious experience, right? They haven't armed to the teeth Staten Island, where the old elite is present. The Chinese scare, which Trumpiola is busy, right? I'm sorry, China's a nasty place. It's horrible in Tibet. It's horrible toward national minorities, as they are called in China. It is not an expansionary power. In fact, it is the only country which conquers up to borders that it claims and then doesn't conquer further, as in the Korean War, where North Korea, on their account, invaded South Korea. And the US came and conquered North Korea and started bombing China, and I saw the broken bridge and was over the border to China. And the Chinese mobilized, and they went and they conquered to the 38th parallel, and they stopped. And they had a border war with India, where they conquered up to where they claimed, and they stopped. So there's another incident where they intervened against Vietnam to preserve their genocidal friends in Cambodia for a month. And they went a little further, but they also got out after a month. Now, if the US behaved like that, you know, I mean, Russia sort of did something like that in Syria, a little bit maybe, except that Syria ain't Russia. But, you know, it's hard to think about another power which does something like that, right? So if you're actually to think about international relations and look at geography and look at maps, the Chinese are not the most militarized. They are far less militarized than we are. We have 1,180 bases abroad. They have no bases abroad. None. Russia has 5, 4 in former Soviet territory, 1 in Syria. France has 5 in former French North Colonial Africa. We have 1,180.
Wow.
Right? I'm just saying, if you take numbers, we've divided the world into 6 zones. Trump's cabinet is 3 generals, more than Obama, including the Pentagon secretary, right? Militarism in the United States is the United States. We have a pretense that it isn't. So anyway, to go back to China, China could really make a hit in the world and help save us from global warming because it's so desperate. You have to breathe the air. So